young man and you're seeing, your peers seemingly be able to communicate, have friends. I mean, you recently learned that, or relatively recently learn about being a little autistic or a lot autistic. I don't know if you can measure that, but the question I guess that comes up for me is that now when you reflect on those times, whether you were the 4 or 5 year old or the 16-year-old, what was the breakdown that you could recognize? Were you umming, awing? Were you not making eye contact? What was that at that starting point? What was the breakdown in communication that you can reflect on and start to say, no, I identify that, the reason they were doing it was because they were, they were more, they spoke with their hands, they had better eye contact, they had better stories, they listened better. What was your breakdown?
So one simple way to look at sort of the way that I've got this different lens on communication, if you like, because all autistic people are slightly different, all neurotypical people are slightly different. My lens on things is simply, if you look at something like banter, when I look at people having this sort of friendly, playful banter back and forth, what I see and what I hear is people insulting each other and then laughing in the other person's face. And somehow that makes their relationship better. And so when I would try it, people would get really offended and not want to speak to me again. And I think, well, I'm just doing what you do. I insulted you and laughed in your face. Like, what's wrong with that? That's supposed to make our relationship better. And I just didn't get it. And so my path into then breaking that down and making that more successful is that I had to break down, what is it that I'm doing differently? And suddenly I started to realize, oh, hang on a second, there's something in their intention. So behind it, there was like this twinkle in their eye. There was this sense of, I'm going to poke you. It's almost like the difference between pushing someone and tickling someone. It could be seen as sort of being similar in some way, but you're not aggressively wrestling them to the ground. You're doing something that's playful that actually enhances the mood of the situation. And so I had to come all the way back down to these basic principles of communication, of thinking the intention is the key. So what intention are you coming into the communication with, and what feeling will the person be left with at the end of that situation? Which is where recently I put this all into the word lift, where I've been teaching business leaders and people of various different backgrounds that if you can think about communication as your ability to lift others, then suddenly that can be your key to unlock all sorts of situations like conflict resolution and doing a job interview, doing a sales pitch and so on, where you think, okay, my aim is by the end of this communication that I can move this person from a negative or a neutral state to a positive or a more positive state. And I'm going to do that through lifting them through my communication, through things in my body language, my tone of voice, my intention, my storytelling that get them to some sort of elevated state. And that was something that took me a really long time to figure out all of those little pieces of what exactly can you do to create that sensation of lift in the interaction.
It's interesting when you first described what you were doing in terms of your interaction where you were seeing these and you tried that. You reminded me of Sheldon on Big Bang Theory because he had that similar challenge. Anyways, I digress. Now, as you started to kind of identify, or when did you start to identify that you're looking through a different lens? You're seeing it through a different set of filters than normal, or I guess, well, I'll call it normal for lack of better words, normal individuals. And then as you start to realize that as you grow and you get your training, that lots of people struggle at some level with communication. They're either try too hard, or it's not sincere, or it comes across as generated. I mean, you must see a lot of that. So is that kind of where you base your training on? Like, where do you enter a conversation? So for example, if you're going to enter a conversation with me, I'm on my podcast, I'm a business owner, I train teams, I train staff, I do some coaching. So when you enter a conversation with me, because I say to you, I say, listen, Richard, how can I improve? What would be a step that I would take? What's your assessment?
So if I'm looking at helping someone to improve their communication, then essentially what I start with is starting, as I'm sure many coaches do, of thinking, what is the end result that we're looking for, and what is currently preventing us. So I'll talk to people about their current challenge. What are you doing right now? What is not working for you? Are there certain people from certain elements within your business or outside your business that you're struggling to connect with? What are your current results? What are you trying in the communication? And if someone is struggling, say for example with sales pitches or speeches, I might ask to see, could we get some video footage of what you've done in the past, so I can get a general frame of reference of where the communication style is right now. And I'll also speak to someone about, what have you tried in the past? What sort of systems do you think are working for you, not working for you? And also what I look at is not just what the results they're getting, but how do they feel? Because sometimes you can get people who are generating great results, but they feel terrible and they are dreading the interaction. They're dreading hosting a team meeting, or they're dreading speaking at a conference. So that's no good either. So I sort of start from that pain point. I also like to move forward and say, can I just understand, if nothing changes for the next 6 months or the next 5 years, if nothing changes from this situation, what is that really leading towards? So let's say that somebody was struggling with, speaking to their team. Where do they think that's going to lead towards? They might say, well, I'm not going to get promoted. Or even if a promotion is there, I'm not going to go for it because I don't want to speak to larger numbers of people. I don't want to be leading people. I'd rather be in the background. I'm going to give those opportunities to others. And that might mean I'm not a good ambassador for my company. No one's going to listen to me. If I try and cascade messages, it's a disaster. Nobody actually does anything. So I talk about that point. Then I'll talk to them and say, where are we heading? Like talk to me about where you'd love to be in 5 years' time. What does that look like for you, for the people around you, for your company? What is that overall impact, starting with you and then going outwards? And the person might say, where I want to be is I want to be in a place where I look forward to speaking to my team. I look forward to speaking on stage. I look forward to pitching to a client because I know that I'm really good at it and I enjoy the process. And I want to see my team feeling inspired and motivated and engaged. And then ultimately, based on that, I want to see my company going to the next level, maybe 10xing where we are right now, and doing that because the impact that we're making is we're able to take these products and services and communicate it in a way that people really care about what we're doing. And so once we've sort of pinned that down, I can then come back to, okay, let's look at what you need to do in order to get there. And what I tend to do is start first of all with someone's mindset, because what I found along the years, and look, I run a company called UK Body Talk. And I launched this company with the name Body Talk because my first interest was with body language. And I would train people on body language. I'd train them on nonverbal communication and so on. And I got to a point where I thought, okay, I can do that. And sometimes I can generate really fantastic results. But there's also, for some people, a resistance where they say, look, I know what you want me to do. I know what I'm supposed to say. I just can't do it. And so I had to come a step back and say, let's just start from the inside. What's happening for you? So I'd start off with mindset. And to give you an example of an activity everyone listening to this can do, is that I say, you've got to become a rock in the storm. And this has been so true. The last few years, we've gone through so much turmoil. We're in lockdown, then we're not in lockdown. And then there's political upheaval, economic upheaval. We don't know what's going on. The cost of living's going through the roof. And so there's so much change going on around us that it can be easy to feel like a ball in a pinball machine. So I say to people, come on back to your mindset and let's get to a place where you have your true north compass. You know who you are, you know what you stand for, and therefore you know which direction you're going to head in every day, no matter what's happening around you. And the simplest way to do this is to write down on a piece of paper, what are your top 3 values? And values, or if you like, principles, if people prefer that term, these are the values that you would be so proud to live your life by, that when you have a really difficult decision, you come back to your values and you think, okay, I care about, maybe a value would be, I put my family first always. So when you're making a decision, that would be different to somebody who says, I put my career first, or I put my reputation first, or I put my honesty first, or I put my health first. What are the values for you that are absolutely critical that you will put first when you're making a big decision? Now, there was a great experiment on this done by David Cresswell and David Sherman back in Germany in around 2015. They did a series of experiments using the triasocial stress test, where they found in one particular one that if they got people to write down their values and spend 15 minutes just associating themselves with their values before they went into a very stressful experience, then they could come out of that experience feeling completely fine, compared to other people who went in who hadn't thought about their values, who are going in there and being demolished. And the reason being, the people who wrote their values had internal validation before the stressful experience. Whereas
Mhm.
people who are not focusing on their values, they're going in trying to get external validation, trying to please the other people, which is what people do in communication all the time. And this is where so many people get it wrong. They go in, they're trying to make the employer want to hire them, or they make the audience try and like them, or they're trying to get their team to agree and go along with an idea. And it's all looking for external validation. And suddenly you're the ball in the pinball machine. So I bring people back to this and say, before you go on stage, before you do a pitch, before you go to meet your team, you're going to really focus in on your validation, your internal validation from your mindset, knowing if I live these values for the rest of this day, no matter what else happens, I will feel proud of myself when I put my head down, and that's what I can control. And so once you've done that piece, you're rock solid in who you are. Then you can start to add on pieces like body language and storytelling and question handling techniques and all those things that goes the next stage out. And then further to that, thinking about those long-term goals you want to achieve.
Richard, I'd like to unpack this with you a little bit because, I'm very much in terms of what my wife and I coach around is living a values driven life, a values
Mm,
based life. And to your point, it becomes so much easier to make decisions when you understand what your values are, because then you're just going, no, that doesn't fit in line with my values. And these aren't moral values. These aren't societal morals. These are values that are important to me and my significant other. And together we live different values, perhaps, but we align in many cases. So a little bit long winded, but I want to get back to here's some of the challenges and how do you overcome the challenges. I mean, I have literally talked to people many times who don't know their values, and or after they do the work they realize that they're living someone else's values, generally parents or family of
yeah.
some sort. So they're misaligned with their values. They think their values are this thing, but it's actually no, that's how I was raised. That was my mom and dad's values, and while I respect that, I'm not living those values. So do you have an exercise or do you have an explanation that people can relate to, and that they say to you, okay, Richard, I get what you're saying, but I'm not really clear on what's this values thing you're talking about?
Yeah, it's a great question because you're so right that some people, I say to them, let's work out your values. And they say, I've never tried to do that in my life. I'm not sure. Or again, like you said, that they have values put upon them by society or by their parents or people
Mhm.
they've seen on Instagram, or it could be all sorts of places.
Yeah.
So one way that you can do it, it's a really great way to elicit the values, is to get people to not write down their values, but write down what do they want. And
Mhm.
I found this by accident because about maybe it's 5 years ago, I was doing an experiment on this with a group of about 12 people in a workshop. And I said, I'd like them to write down their values. And they were a really young group and they didn't really understand what I meant. And so
Mhm.
instead of writing down values, they wrote down what they want. And so I went to the first person. I said, could you share? I'd given them like 10 minutes to work on it. I said, could you share your values? And this guy said, my number one value in life is money. I said to
Mhm.
him, okay, well, money is actually something that you want. It's not really a value. Can you tell me the story about why it is that you want money? And then I can tell you what your value is. And he said, yeah, well, when I was younger, we didn't have any money. He said that he grew up completely broke. When he came home from school, he didn't know where he was going to sleep at night, and the only meal he was guaranteed in the day was the meal that he had at lunchtime at school. And so now that he was older, he was in a position of having he was married and he had a child, and he said he wanted to make absolutely certain that his family always had a roof over their head and make absolutely certain they always had 3 meals per day. And I said to him, based on that, the story is telling me that your value is probably something like security. That's what the money is going to give you, is that sense of fulfilling that value. And he
Mhm.
looked at me like I lifted the weight of the world off his shoulders. And he said, you're so right. That's it. And people around him were saying, that's how you live your life. That's how you're making your decisions. It's always about like safety, security. How are you going to do something in that way? And what was fascinating for me in that room, this is how I really learned. You've got to ask people, what do they want? And then find out the story of why they want it. Because there was a lady in that room who put her hand up and she said, I don't understand what you just did because I wrote down money, but my life is completely different to his. So what does that mean for me? And I said, okay, money is what you want. Tell me the story of why that is that you want it. And so she said, well, I've always had money. I come from a middle class background. We've always had a comfortable amount of money. But she said, the thing is for me, when I go to a restaurant, I never want to look at the prices. I just want to be able to order whatever I feel like having. And she said that she would always keep her passport in her handbag so that if she felt like it on a Friday afternoon, she could just go straight to the airport, buy a ticket to go wherever she wanted to go on the weekend, to be with whoever she wanted to be with, doing whatever she wanted to do. And that's what money was about for her. And I said, okay, well, I think it sounds like money is giving you a sense of freedom. And she said, that's it. That's my value. That's what I want to do. And everyone looked at her and said, that's exactly, you never commit to anything. You always want a sense of freedom. And so that was one of her key values. So they both wanted the same thing, but they had a very different story. And so if people get a blocker on trying to figure out what their values might be, then I go down that path of saying, what is it that you really want? What are your strongest desires? Let's figure out the story of why you want it. And there'll be a value attached to it. And the value is the thing that you're looking for, which is where, for some people, they might think, I want $1 million, and they get $1 million and they don't feel happy. And they think, well, why is that? I sort of thought that was what I wanted, but they didn't fulfill their value on the path to getting there, because maybe one of their values is integrity, and they had linked integrity and wealth, and high wealth individuals maybe having high integrity, but they did it in a way that broke their integrity. And then suddenly they think, it doesn't feel like I thought it would feel. So that's a great way of just picking apart what they want, the story, and then finding the value.
I love it. And many years ago, and we've been really coaching around values and living a values driven life, and really discovering how easy it is to get off track. So to your
Yeah.
point, there's some fundamental learning and understanding that we gain, your point, money. Well, it's interesting that money translates usually to financial health or financial certainty or security or financial freedom. If that's one of your values, you live into that value. What's interesting about this is what I've learned, and if you're okay having this conversation, I think it's important to listeners to give them some tools to work with, and then we'll carry on. But there is a fundamental challenge that I see, and I say, okay, list your top 5 values. People list their top 5 values, but what is missing for them is, they want financial certainty of some sort or financial security. And then I say, list your top 5 values. And it's okay, well, family, there's nothing more important than family, right? You got to have family. My church is really, really important. My community, that's really, really important to me. So they go down their list of values, and the word finance or money isn't even in their top 5 values yet. They say that is exactly what they're missing, or that's where they see the gap. So it is interesting to kind of point out to people sometimes is that you say that's what you want. You want that financial certainty, that financial security. You haven't even listed it as one of your top 3, top 5 values. And so it's no surprise that you're not living into that and making decisions based on that. Because once you realize and once you own it, because a lot of people feel guilty, they feel guilty when they put money as their highest values. That just isn't the right thing to do, and they have a story around it, whatever their upbringing is. So I digress a
Yeah.
little bit. But I'll share with you one of the tools that I learned, like I say, 20 plus years ago when when we were working with a guy by the name of Dr. John DeMartini. I don't know if you've crossed him,
Yes.
but John really does a great job. He says, you want to know what your values are? It's really simple. You are always living your values, whether the right values or your truest values or not. So look at where you spend your money, where do you spend your time, what are you surrounded by? And it will start to identify exactly what your values are. And it's so true is that people go, I don't know what my values are. Okay, well, look at what you're surrounded by. What are your surroundings? What are you spending your money on? What do you spend your time doing? What do you spend your time talking about? Those will ultimately be your first indicator to what your highest values are, or the highest values you're living. And then you can start to put in the correction if you realize that, holy cow, that is not even being true to myself, which is about the integrity side of the conversation. So I just love these conversations because it's a body of work that you're doing, and have been doing for many years, yet it still seems so, I guess, rare or vague to people to understand that living a values-based life operating a values-based company, having a values-based culture within your company. These are all things that improve communication, back to where we started the conversation around communication. And when you even are hiring people, it's like, do you align with our values? When you start to
Mm.
realize that like attracts like, the clearer you are on your values,
Yeah.
the more likely you are to attract people that align with those values and have great friends. So I
Yeah,
guess
well,
a
okay,
long
just
comment.
to dive into that, I've got a thought to add there, which is I've done a lot of
Please.
work the last few years on companies where they have announced the values of the company. Like there's this big announcement of, hey everyone, these are our new values that we're going to be living by, and they give people sweatshirts and they give people coffee mugs with the values on, and they put them up in they sort of chip them into the marble in the foyer of the reception area or so, and they
Sure.
say these are our values. We want to live by these values, and then people go about their day and they don't change anything. And
Mhm.
they occasionally will come to me and say, look, can you work with our leadership team to actually own these values so that we're doing something about it? And so what I do with them is to create bridges in values, because the thing is, as you said there, you've got, people have values, but companies have values, and they may not be the same, but there needs to be some kind of alignment. So what I'll often work on with teams, and you can do this with hundreds of people at a time, when there's been a new values launch, I'll sort of step in and say to them, okay, let's work out individual values. So I do a whole workshop around that piece. Then I say to them, these values that have just been announced that your company is supposed to be living out, and they look at them and go, yeah. And I say, can you remember what they are? Oh, no. I say to them, okay, well, this is what those values are. This is what they're supposed to mean. Now I'd like you to try and find a bridge. I want you to look at your personal values and see how there is a connection. Where is there alignment with just one of these values, where you can suddenly see that you are able to live your values every day by living out that key company value. And they suddenly start to see, oh, hang on a second, there is a connection. And so it can just take them off like rocket fuel in the right direction. And to go back to like a simple, really example on this is to go back to your example where you said, the person who says they want financial security, but their top values would be family and church, say, for example, in that situation. And so what I would say to someone in that situation is, okay, well, family's number one. What kind of role model do you want to be for your family? Well, I want to show them they can do anything that they want to do, and I want to be a great provider for them. Okay, so let's see if we can just bridge that to the finances. So you're saying that finances allows you to be the version of the person in the family that you want to be. Oh yeah, hang on a second. So finances equals doing the good thing in my family. I get it. So providing I'm putting my family first and not throwing them to the curb in earning money, then actually earning finances allows me to be a provider. It allows me to be someone who shows them you can achieve your goals. And same thing in the church. You can say, well, sorry, are you showing up at church and then just asking people to give to you? Or are you giving to the church and giving to the community? Are you sort of showing up as a pillar of the community who's providing service? The more service you provide, the more value you offer, the more financially you're going to be rewarded for that. And you need to be okay with that in order to be a pillar of the community who gives greater service. And then they're bridging it, and they suddenly create these bridges. And when I do this in a room of people where there's like, several hundred people who have their own individual values, and you get them to create bridges to the company's values, they suddenly look at each other like, I can't wait to get to work on Monday because I get to live out my values. This is fantastic. And it sometimes just takes that moment of creating the bridge. It's like a new neural pathway where they go, this is what I want. That's what the company wants. And I now know how to serve it in a way that is meaningful for me. It gives them purpose in what they're doing day to day. So it can be a really nice sort of light bulb moment for them.
I love that thought process, and bridging values. There's a fundamental around it all, right? Which is when you get clear on your values, there are decisions you're going to have to make. So there is back to your point in terms of aligning with the values of a company. The values of the company may be really out of whack for you in terms of how they sell, for example. Is
Yeah.
it an integrity based sale, or are they getting the sale at all costs? You can
Mm.
walk the line of gray, and it's not black or white, it's a little gray. Can you actually get people over the edge by just telling a little bit of a story that maybe exaggerates what we do? Now some people can pull that off, and they can go, no, I'll compromise, but I'm good with that. Whatever it takes.
Yeah.
I'm getting a great commission check. Others have to draw a line because they can't live with that. They go, no, I cannot do this anymore, or I can't do that. So those
Mm.
are really the fundamentals of understanding, I think, values. Is that I love what you say. Can you bridge it? And there might be a time where you can't bridge it, and you're going to
Yeah.
have to make a tough decision, perhaps. But
Mm.
when you're living your values, when I think about this, Richard, one of the we talk about in the values based life is the definition of integrity, and I come back to it often because somebody, I say to somebody, what's one of your highest values, or what's your top three values? And ultimately somebody says integrity, and I go, okay, well, what does integrity mean to you? And
Yeah.
generally integrity, in most people's definition, or many people's definition, it's about telling the truth. And I go, okay, well, tell me
Mm.
more about that. And, well, not lying, but then you ultimately get to the question of, okay, telling the truth to who? And it
Mm.
always comes back to understanding that I can't really be out of integrity with you. You can't be out of integrity with me. I can only ever be out of integrity with myself. So if integrity is about lying, it's about lying to myself. It's about knowing that I use the definition of integrity is who you are when nobody's looking. Not my definition, but that's one that I
Yeah.
use, you know, because ultimately I can lie to you. I can stretch the truth. I can be dishonest, but is that out of integrity? If one of my highest values is just getting the sale at all costs, no, I'm not out of integrity. I'm getting the sale. That's my highest value, is making money,
Mm.
getting that sale. But if you're saying, no, I want to get the sale, but I want to do it in a way that is in alignment with my client's outcome, but I lie about it to get the sale, then I'm out of integrity. Does that make sense? Am I
Yeah,
in
yeah,
line
it
with?
really does. And I think that integrity is a great conversation to have, which is I would say that one of my definitions behind it would be living in complete alignment with who you are is really who you say you are is how you act day to day, and that can be a full sense of integrity.
Yeah,
And
well,
this is a conversation I sometimes have with people around that piece, that it's so important for your reputation. I think it was Warren Buffett who said it can take decades to build a reputation and 5 minutes to lose it. But
yes.
it's actually, the reputation gets lost based on you. It's doing something. People find out that you've done something that is out of alignment with everything that you say that you are and say that you do. And so this is a piece where I'm able to talk about this because I'm British, so I have enough distance from this. But I have this conversation with people sometimes about American politics. So I'm looking at this as an outsider. I'm fairly neutral politically, so I'll just put that up to begin with. But I talk about this where there was a situation in the election. I think it was the 2016 election, where Donald Trump. There was this Hollywood access tape of him talking about grabbing women. And people said, "Oh, that's it. The election's over for him." But actually, he went up in the polls, and he ultimately went on to win. And a lot of people scratched their heads, saying, "Well, how is that even possible?" If Barack Obama had a tape coming out about him doing that, he would have been finished. And the conversation I had around it was to say, but you've got to understand who are they positioning themselves to be. And Donald Trump is the kind of person who said, "Let's build a wall, let's lock her up, let's smash and grab, let's do things, let's make us first again." Like what he was found out doing on the Hollywood access tape is absolutely in alignment with the kind of person people thought he was anyway. So it's not
Mhm.
out of integrity with who he is saying that he is, or who he's trying to portray himself to be. And so that's where you've got to think about, who do I want people to see me as, but actually who am I really genuinely? And
Mhm.
are those two things in alignment? Because if they're not, you're going to be in trouble. So you've got to make sure that who you are in your heart, that's what you're going to live out, and you're going to live out those values day to day, even when nobody's watching.